What a year, boys. As 2022 comes to a close, we come into a new year, a new feeling, something that we've never felt before. Things are changing at a rapid rate. I know I can't keep up, can anybody? Are we moving at a speed too quick? Are we biting off a piece too big to chew? Anyways, I've been wanting to make a video about the censorship in this modern, technologically progressive era, especially with this COVID nonsense. I gotta spell it out because they delete your videos on here for mentioning it and then saying what you feel about it. So hopefully the spelling will work. But I recently I was turned on to this TV show by my boss called The Man in the High Castle. The show was made in 2015, but I've never heard of it. I knew it was a Philip K. Dick novel, which he is one of my all-time favorite authors, and he's going to be a theme in this video. But the TV show is about an alternative reality where the Axis powers won World War II. So it was Germany and Japan who actually won World War II, and they split the United States down the middle. So the left side, California and everything, mostly in the west, closer to Japan, was the Pacific states, the Japanese Pacific states, and the right side, like New York and most of the east side, was German, the American Reich, which a lot of us know at this point that the science fiction novels, and especially the big ones, allude to truth, but can't. You put the conspiracy stuff and the deep secrets and the fables and the science fiction because you're able to dismiss it as fiction but put in things that are frighteningly truthful. And this show is it's amazing that they've had different directors and producers on it for each season, and each show, even some of the episodes have different, it's not really consistent. My point being that they have a lot of different intelligent minds on this show, and Philip K. Dick's daughter is actually a producer on it. And it's interesting because she has a very high view of her father, and her children have devoted their lives to upholding his writings and his work and expanding on that. And the censorship issue isn't new, but coming into how they paint up America being split down the middle is very interesting, and how the Nazis and the Japanese kind of are at peace. And the beginning of the show is basically about that tension increasing between the Nazis and the Japanese being more behind in technology. German technology is supposed to be the bomb. The Audis, it's a German engineering, but the Japanese they're a peaceful culture, and they are about peace and stability of the empire. And I don't know what came over me. I just blacked out for a second. Sorry. The Japanese are more benevolent, but they have their traditional strong hand views. Like the generals are very like, we must maintain that the empire is the leader of the, like they're kind of being pushed into a corner by the Nazis, who are just kind of like sadistically just waiting for them to slip up and take over the whole America. And it's interesting to look at this because when you hear about Project Paperclip and how a lot of the major Nazi officials were protected and groomed by the U.S., hence Werner von Braun, Joseph Mengele is in the show. I'm only on season 3 out of 4 seasons, but hey, 4 seasons. But Joseph Mengele is performing experiments. And it goes into the time. This is a spoiler, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Sorry, but it's not, it's still a lot of other stuff. But these are kind of like the main points. A big theme that they're studying is time travel and alternate realities, which Philip K. Dick was no stranger to writing about. One of the main characters, Tagomi, who's the trade minister of the Japanese Pacific States, who's kind of one of the benevolent people who are on both sides and don't want war and can see the bigger picture of it all. he can time travel. So he would meditate and end up in the version we live in now, where America came in and the Allied powers won as it is today. And it really puts you through some sort of crazy. It really makes you think, like, what if the Axis powers did win, in a sense, where all these Germans were basically osmosified into the United States and have become pivotal parts of our scientific developments. Werner von Braun and NASA. And another big thing is the Bush family, how Prescott Bush, the granddaddy Bush, debatably made their fortune and political imprint through backing Nazi financial companies. And I actually want to read an article here that I brought up about Prescott Bush. This is from theguardian.com. George Bush's grandfather, the late U.S. Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement in the financial backers of Nazi Germany. The Guardian has obtained confirmation from newly discovered files in the U.S. National Archives that a firm of which Prescott Bush was a director was involved with the financial architects of Nazism. The business dealings, which continued until his company's assets were seized in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act, has led more than 60 years later to his civil action for damages being brought in Germany against the Bush family by two former slave laborers at Auschwitz, and to a hum of pre-election controversy. The evidence has also prompted one former U.S. Nazi war crimes prosecutor to argue that the late senator's action should have been grounds for prosecution for giving aid and comfort to the enemy. And this is fascinating because there was Prescott Bush, and then his son became president, was the director of the CIA, and countless forms of betrayal to the country and to the people. And then his bright son, George W., became president as well. And you see how they had their hands in science, politics, and what more intelligent, covert, and subtle way to infiltrate America and change things from within than to do it in a more subtle way. They lost the war. Now they had to hide and be sneaky in order to subvert our original American way of life, and subvert our freedoms, which we see being taken away slowly, bit after bit. It's kind of, and there's so many parallels with the show, because how the Nazis operated, where they slowly put the pressure on and did one thing after the other, little tweaks. Himmler having his little spies and assassins, as well as Obergruppenführer John Smith, who is one of the main antagonists. Philip K. Dick has a way of making you feel bad for the enemy, like showing you what they're going through on their side, how they're diluted from childhood, from growing up in the name of doing your duty and being loyal and protecting your family, all that jazz. I'd like to go to another article that I found with Philip K. Dick on The Man in the High Castle, because I wanted to see if there were any occult ties behind it. Through reading, like Valis, for example, by Philip K. Dick, he refers to a pink beam of light that hits him in the forehead, like the third eye. It's very symbolic, where the pink beam of light hits him and he gets all these visions of alternate realities and lives. The pink light seems to symbolize, Rosicrucian symbolism. So it seems he was heavily into the occult, even if he didn't know it, which I think he did after you hear this article. This is from Technocult, Mutate Your Mind. Interesting. The title is Philip K. Dick's FBI File and the Bizarre Story of a Neo-Nazi Plot to Start a Third World War. This is written on February 17th, 2010. Dick knew that there had to be an FBI file on his activities because, as he told the Bureau in the letter requesting access to it, quote, "In the early 50s, two agents of the FBI, Mr. George Scruggs and Mr. George Smith, approached me," end quote. Undoubtedly, one of the prime reasons why Dick attracted attention from the FBI was a series of bizarre letters he penned to the Bureau in the early 1970s, in which he described his personal knowledge of an alleged underground Nazi cabal that was attempting to covertly manipulate science fiction writers to further advance its hidden cause. And the nature of that cause was even more bizarre: to initiate a third world war by infecting the American population with syphilis. On the 28th of October, 1972, Dick wrote to the FBI and outlined his distinctly odd beliefs. Quote, "I am a well-known author of science fiction novels, one of which dealt with Nazi Germany, called Man in the High Castle. It described an alternate world in which the Germans and Japanese won World War II and jointly occupied the United States. This novel, published in 1962 by Putnam and Company, won the Hugo Award for Best Novel of the Year and hence was widely read both here and abroad. For example, a Japanese edition printed in Tokyo ran into several editions. I bring this to your attention because several months ago, I was approached by an individual who I have reason to believe belonged to a covert organization involved in politics, illegal weapons, etc., who put great pressure on me to place coded information in future novels to be read by the right people here and there, as he phrased it. I refuse to do this," end quote. I find this little article to be insanely revealing because, given Philip K. Dick was reportedly pretty paranoid, and it seemed that it was kind of a delusion that the FBI had any interest in him at all. But judging by his books and how they made this show, it's very subliminal and subversive because there's a lot of similarities to how they run the American Reich and how things are right now in America. One other small thing I'd like to bring up is how this may seem small, but it's kind of like the little pinpricks all around in different areas that are showing some sort of closing in on the censorship. One thing being how you can't screenshot anything online on the phone anymore. A little experiment: just try to go on your phone and search up some image or something like that and try to screenshot it. There will be a message that pops up saying that it's against the security policy, which is, I didn't sign anything. There's nothing that seemed to change, but now you can't screenshot it due to some phantom security policy. I understand how it doesn't seem that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's when you say anything about the pandemic and certain things on Facebook, Instagram, any social media, Twitter, things get taken down at an alarming rate. YouTube videos, they just take them down. You can try to appeal it, but if they've made up their mind, you're not getting the video back. And I've had this happen to friends, myself. And where's the line drawn between freedom of speech and what is acceptable by the YouTube or whatever social media guidelines? I've heard stuff on YouTube and social media that should definitely not be on there, but seeing what's selected and how selective the censorship is, and how there's on Snapchat, the Snapchat stories, how it's all just sex and transsexual stuff. It's pushing this on our youth. It's just there, and there's hundreds of different stories that they just put on your feed, and the smart ads, the customized ads, where it kind of plays on your little what's on the back of your mind, and it just studies the algorithm of your behaviors, which works in good ways and bad ways. I mean, I love when I just find a bunch of things that are perfect for research topics and what I'm actually interested in. But it can also go the other way, where it's steered more towards corrupting rather than building up a population. They want people rooted in their vices, no doubt. It seems that organizations that are controlling how countries run, especially in the United States, they are giving little seeds of truth in the media and Hollywood, as well as implanting paranoias and delusions of the like. And part of their code is to show the people what they're doing, but it doesn't. There's no requirement on how you do it. They're not going to go on the news and just tell us straight up. More like work it in to the forms of art and media as to make it almost like a joke, or if you know type thing. Another thing I wanted to go into is how Carl Jung described kind of the Nazi fever, the nationalism that took took over Germany and how the people were invigorated, and it was pure solar symbolism, which is kind of what drove the Japanese and the Reich, which was interesting. An interesting thing I noticed in the show as well is how, it's the Japanese and the Nazis, and the swastika is, it's a Sanskrit or Vedic symbol. It's an Indo-Aryan solar symbol, and they were all fatherland, solar attack. We're the only ones, the radiance, the hubris. The Japanese flag is a sun as well, and their symbol is, the rising sun, the solar symbolism as well. So it was an interesting choice on these two solar empires crashing and clashing and splitting the United States. And Jung, in his book The Undiscovered Self, goes into how he was almost swept by the Nazi nationalism. And I have an article here that I looked up, and it's pubmed.gov. Not that I necessarily agree with it, but it's an interesting article. It kind of shows how the individual mentality is taken away and substituted for the crowd mentality, which was the Nazi Reich, and how they represented it in the American Reich as well. Jung's views of Nazi Germany, the first year, and Jung's transition. This article first considers Jung's response to the coming to power of the Nazis in Germany. It brings forth evidence that, besides wanting to preserve psychotherapy in Germany and maintain the international connection between the German and other communities of psychotherapists, he wanted to advance Jungian psychology, his psychology, in Germany. It also presents evidence that although he occasionally made some anti-Semitic statements during the early period, he was not anti-Semitic in the way the Nazis were. The paper then argues that after Gustav Bali's criticisms in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung in February 1934, Jung entered into a transitional period, that spring during which he became warier both of the Nazis and of making any statements that could be construed as being anti-Semitic. Schonel and Peck, 2012, have shown how Jung's views of Nazi Germany changed from 1933 to March 1936. This present article demonstrates very significant changes in Jung's views during the important early part of this period, that is, from January 1933, when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, through to the spring of 1934. It draws on evidence from archival and other primary sources. And The Undiscovered Self, the book, was published in 1958, and Jung sort of wrote this after it all happened, so this is in hindsight, and he sees how swept away he was in the Nazi idealism and the nationalism, because, when you're coming out on top and you're like, yeah, we them boys, you're going to go along with it. You're going to be like, yeah, we them boys, you guys aren't. Jung kind of had to step back and look at that from an objective view and realize how the individualism was attacked covertly and subversively. And it's no question anymore that Heinrich Himmler, Hitler, were interested in the occult. And if you look at Himmler's early life, he was kind of a dork. He was a sick child, and he was into mysticism from a young age. So those types tend to get a little more idealistic and imaginative, which comes into the Aryan race eugenics thing, which he was heavily into. All the other, like a lot of the other Nazi generals claimed that they didn't know what they were getting into. They just wanted to make a pure race, and it sounds good in the beginning, but you realize that that's just psychotic, and you have to literally work against nature. Himmler was also the spearhead behind Lebensborn, which was the eugenics program where they were basically making Aryan soldiers to be in his SS. He regarded these kids as his children, so they would have mothers give birth in these facilities, and then they would raise these kids from birth with Nazi ideals and however Himmler wanted to program them. And this is very interesting in the show as well, The Man in the High Castle, because one of the main characters finds out he is one of the Lebensborn and didn't know it. So he was just groomed to end up fulfilling his quote-unquote destiny, which is whatever the Reich has in mind for that person, and it's a good way to brainwash a soldier by saying this is your destiny, you were born for this, making them feel special about it. But it's interesting how almost a century later these cycles repeat, and how the Nazi nationalism has kind of crept its way into the underbelly of America, and kind of makes you think about the founding America and the Freemasonic involvement, George Washington, the founding fathers, all the Freemason backing. Are they all on the same team, or is America really a free, liberty, individual rights, pursuit of happiness country that our Constitution states? Or has it been a covert? Is there something a little dark behind it all, where it seems like we're free, but they've just given us a bunch of toys to play with and keep us distracted, which is the theme of many art pieces, many movies, many films, that feeling in the back of the psyche that something's wrong here. It is what you make it, without a doubt, but we don't know we're inside of a box until we see the box. So that's the video. Hope you liked it. Hope it sparked some thought. And check out the book and the show, The Man in the High Castle. Very interesting. Happy New Year, and to all, a good night.